Your presence creates a shift in the energy of the room the moment you walk in. They may not admit it, but you can feel it. The sudden silence, the way their eyes dart away, and how their behavior changes. The laughter dies down, and you're left wondering what you did to make things uncomfortable. But it's not about what you did. It's about who you are. It's about the effect your presence has on them, even when you haven't said a word. You've been told that you're too much, too intense, too quiet, too deep. Your energy is hard to explain, and even harder to forget. But what if your presence isn't a problem? It's a revelation. What if, like Carl Jung believed, you carry something others don't recognize, not charisma, not charm, but clarity. A kind of psychological force, a stillness that strips away masks and unsettles people. Not because you're dangerous, but because you're real. You don't play roles, you don't seek approval, and you don't hide from your shadow. This alone makes people uncomfortable because your presence forces them to face everything they try to avoid. Their uncertainty, their shame, their need to perform. So they shrink, gossip, and keep their distance. Not because they see you as a threat, but because they feel one. Carl Jung spent his life studying this kind of energy, the quiet gravity of those who have integrated their unconscious. This presence is not only felt, but it reflects a person who has faced themselves. This video is about revealing 13 signs that your presence might be quietly unsettling to others. Not because you're broken, but because you're awake. In a world built on illusion, nothing is more feared than someone who sees clearly. Most people think of an aura as a mystical energy, a glowing cloud of colors that only psychics or spiritual healers can perceive. But Jung saw it differently. He believed that your aura wasn't a layer of light, it was a psychological field. An invisible force shaped not by crystals or chakras, but by your unconscious mind. He said every person radiates a silent influence, a kind of psychic gravity that extends far beyond words, facial expressions, or even intentions. This field is shaped by the parts of you that are hidden, repressed, and denied. Your aura is not created by who you pretend to be, but by who you actually are. It's especially influenced by the parts of yourself you've had the courage to face. When you confront your shadow and integrate your trauma, flaws, and truths, something shifts in you. You stop seeking validation, stop leaking neediness, stop conforming just to fit in. In this quiet transformation, your presence starts to carry weight. It's not loud or aggressive, but undeniable. You become someone people feel before they fully understand you. You don't need to speak much, because your silence speaks volumes. You make others feel exposed, not because you're trying to, but because your energy speaks to what they're trying to hide. Jung called this the unconscious transmission of the self, the way your presence communicates far more than your personality. This is why people stare at you longer, why they can't explain why they feel nervous around you, why they feel judged even when you've said nothing. It's not that you're giving off bad vibes. It's that your aura is integrated, and most people have never encountered that kind of energy before. You didn't learn to intimidate, you learned to be honest. And honesty, as Jung warned, is a rare frequency, because it only comes from someone who has done the inner work. Sign 1. People compete with you silently. You're not trying to outshine anyone. You're not showing off, and you're not even part of the competition. But somehow, people try to win around you. They start dropping names, bragging, flexing their accomplishments, speaking louder, trying harder. And you're just observing. You never asked for this competition, but your presence triggered it anyway. Jung believed that when someone carries integrated energy, the kind that comes from inner alignment, it makes people uncomfortable if their identity is built on comparison. Your self-assurance isn't performative. You're not trying to dominate, you're just clear. And clarity makes insecure people panic. They feel the need to prove themselves, not because you're challenging them, but because your existence challenges the story they've built about themselves. To the ego, your calm is a threat, your stillness feels like power, and your detachment appears superior. And so, their ego scrambles. They compete, try to reclaim ground that was never lost. This is why you might notice people subtly trying to one-up you, correct you, outtalk you, or act defensive when you simply express a thought. It's not about you. It's about the identity their ego is trying to protect. You're not triggering rivalry, you're triggering a realization that confidence doesn't need noise, and that kind of presence can't be faked. You've stepped outside of the game, and those still trapped in the illusion of winning can't help but treat your presence as a silent threat. Sign 2. Your presence kills small talk instantly. You're not trying to be rude. You smile, nod, and say the right words, but the moment someone tries small talk around you, it dies. The conversation thins, the energy shifts, and people feel it, even if they can't explain why. You're not being cold, you're just being real. Your energy doesn't know how to fake it. Jung believed that when someone connects deeply with their unconscious, they develop what he called psychological attunement. It's a natural sensitivity to what's authentic and what's not. That sensitivity is part of your aura. You don't need to say, "This feels fake." Your presence already does that for you without a word. Surface-level conversation, the weather, gossip, pleasantries, doesn't match your frequency. Your presence demands depth, not by force, but through contrast. People feel it. Their subconscious picks up on it. Your stillness calls out their noise, and your calm exposes the performance. So, they shrink the conversation, stumble, get quiet, or walk away. They may say something about how you're intense, but it's not intensity, it's alignment. You've spent time in silence, sat with your shadow, and asked the difficult questions most people avoid. And now, your presence carries weight. Not the weight of arrogance, but the gravity of someone who doesn't waste words. In a world addicted to distraction, that kind of energy ends the performances and exposes the void between words. And that's where truth begins. Sign 3. You unmask the hidden agenda in others. You don't accuse anyone, expose secrets, or even speak. But somehow, people feel seen in your presence, not in a way that makes them comfortable. The manipulator grows quiet, the charmer stumbles, and the overly nice person suddenly seems unsure. Why? Because your energy sees beneath the surface. Jung believed that when someone has integrated their shadow, they develop a kind of psychological X-ray, an inner vision that cuts through performance and gets to the motive. You're not judging, not analyzing, just present. But that presence sends a signal. You can't lie here. And so, the mask starts to slip. The game becomes obvious. The script feels stale. People who rely on control, performance, or manipulation feel this shift immediately, though they don't know why. Something in them pulls back. They get defensive, awkward, or even hostile. Not because you've caught them, but because your presence reminded them that they've been performing for so long, they don't even know who they are without the act. For someone clinging to illusion, the worst thing they can feel is visible. You didn't confront them, you didn't call them out. You just were. But being real in a room full of masks is confrontation enough. Your silence doesn't expose people through words. It exposes them through contrast. When someone's entire identity is a performance, even your silence feels like a spotlight. Sign 4. People feel judged, even when you say nothing. You didn't criticize anyone, didn't correct anyone, and didn't flinch. But somehow they still felt it, the sting, the tension, that subtle rush of defensiveness. Why? Because your silence speaks louder than their masks. Your presence doesn't need to say a word, it already says everything. Jung taught that when you've integrated your unconscious and made peace with your own flaws, darkness, and truth, you radiate something unsettling to those who haven't. It's not aggression, it's not judgment, it's just alignment. And for someone who is out of alignment, that feels like being exposed. Your stillness becomes a mirror. Your eye contact feels too raw. Your calmness feels almost accusatory. Not because you're condemning anyone, but because they are suddenly aware of everything they've buried. People feel judged by you not because you're looking down on them, but because you're not performing with them. When someone's identity depends on external validation, your neutrality feels like rejection. Your silence feels like disapproval. Your peace feels like a threat. They'll say you're cold, too quiet, unfriendly. But what they really mean is, you make me feel things I'm not ready to feel. You don't need to speak to challenge someone. Your very presence creates a contrast between who they are and who they pretend to be. And that contrast doesn't lie. It lingers long after the conversation ends. Sign 5. You trigger envy without even trying. You're not trying to impress anyone. You're not competing, and you're not even speaking about yourself. but somehow you still become a target. The side eyes, the passive-aggressive comments, the fake compliments laced with tension. It's there. You can feel it. The unspoken resentment from people who barely know you. Jung believed that when someone is internally aligned, when they radiate peace without seeking permission, they challenge everyone who isn't. Your calm is intimidating to anxious people. Your confidence feels arrogant to those who secretly doubt themselves. Your authenticity offends those who still live behind masks. It's not that you're doing anything wrong. It's because your existence reflects what they're not. You don't need to say a word. Your energy already says, I've faced myself. And for someone running from their reflection, that truth hurts. You may notice how people twist your strengths into flaws. They call your peace detached, your clarity self-righteous, your solitude arrogance. But it's not about you. It's about what they feel in themselves when you're around. You're a mirror and mirrors don't lie. You trigger envy, not because you're perfect, but because you carry something rare, inner wholeness. And in a world of fragmentation, that wholeness is not just seen, it's felt. And what's felt cannot be ignored. Sign 6. People act differently when you're around. They were laughing, telling stories, owning the room before you arrived. But then you walked in, and something changed. The volume dropped, the tone shifted, their posture stiffened. Even the air felt heavier, and you didn't say a word. Jung believed that when someone carries an integrated presence, someone whose self has been forged through shadow work and inner truth, their very existence disrupts the performances of others. You don't need to challenge anyone. Your presence already does. You bring a different energy, one that doesn't chase attention, one that doesn't beg for belonging, one that doesn't need to impress to feel valid. That energy creates contrast. It's a contrast most people aren't prepared to feel. The loudest person in the room becomes quieter. The self-proclaimed leader stumbles over their words. The group dynamic that once felt so comfortable now feels uncertain, unstable, exposed. Why? Because you don't operate within their script. You don't play the social game. You're not performing, and that makes their performance painfully obvious. They don't know why they feel different around you, but they do. And it's not about fear, it's about pressure. The silent pressure of being real. Your presence doesn't ask for truth. Creates it. In a world built on social masks, that kind of presence doesn't just stand out. It reshapes the entire room. Sign 7. Fake authority feels threatened by you. You've seen it, the shift in posture, the sudden defensiveness, the way the person in charge starts correcting you, even when you didn't challenge them. Or worse, they avoid you, exclude you, pretend not to notice you. Why? Because your presence makes them feel less in control. Jung believed that real power comes from within, from integration, not domination. When someone with real power enters the room, those who rely on status feel it immediately. You don't obey invisible hierarchies. You don't shrink yourself to make others feel important, and you don't automatically respect titles, roles, or egos. That alone is dangerous to them. You didn't break the rules. You simply don't need the rules to define you. And that makes people who live for validation feel exposed. Your quiet self-assurance threatens those who've built their authority on image. Not because you challenge them, but because your energy doesn't bend to them. It's not rebellion. It's self-possession. And in environments built on compliance, that feels like resistance. You'll notice how some authority figures subtly try to test you, undermine you, outtalk you, or diminish your presence. But none of it works because your power isn't performative, it's psychological. And psychological power doesn't flinch. You don't need to raise your voice or prove your worth. You just need to exist fully, and those pretending to lead will feel it because your presence says, I don't fear your image. I see through it. Sign 8. You're seen as dangerous when you set boundaries. You were kind, present, giving your time, energy, and attention. But then one day you didn't. You said no, you pulled back, you protected your space, and suddenly, something changed. Now you're cold, distant, arrogant. The narrative flips, not because you hurt anyone, but because you stopped letting them use you. Jung believed that those who've integrated their shadow no longer seek to be liked by everyone because they've already made peace with not belonging. When you set boundaries, you shift the power dynamic. You remind people gently but firmly that your energy is yours to give, not theirs to take. For those who were only drawn to your softness, your silence now feels like betrayal. Your no feels like a threat, not because it's cruel, but because it's sovereign. You don't over-explain. You don't over-apologize. You simply stop allowing what no longer feels right. And that makes people uncomfortable, especially those who depended on your availability to avoid their own emptiness. They'll say you've changed, that you're closed off, that you think you're better than them. But the truth is, you just stopped playing the role they liked you in. You reclaimed your energy. And people don't like losing access to what they never appreciated. You're not dangerous. You're just no longer easy to manipulate. In a world where control often hides behind connection, boundaries look like rebellion. But they're actually the beginning of self-respect. Sign 9. Others project their darkness onto you. You were just being kind. You listened, showed up, gave space, but somehow you became the villain. They said you were manipulative, cold, passive-aggressive, hard to read, even dangerous. You're left wondering how, when all you did was exist honestly. Carl Jung called this phenomenon projection. When a person can't face their own shadow, they unconsciously assign it to someone else. You didn't judge them, you didn't attack them, you simply reflected something back that they weren't ready to see. Instead of confronting their insecurity, they saw arrogance in your confidence. Instead of owning their guilt, they saw judgment in your silence. Instead of recognizing their neediness, they saw manipulation in your calm. Your presence became a canvas for the emotions they couldn't name, for the flaws they couldn't accept, for the darkness they couldn't hold. So they painted you with the colors of their own shadow. You were never cruel, you were never false, but you were clear. And that clarity can feel violent to someone who's been lying to themselves. You didn't hurt them. Your presence made them feel uncomfortably seen, and people would rather label you as toxic than admit that your energy awakens something painful in them. You're not carrying their darkness, but they'll try to make you carry it because it's easier to blame the mirror than face the reflection. Sign 10. People confess, then disappear. They opened up to you, told you things they hadn't shared with anyone, shared their trauma, their regrets, their unspoken thoughts. And for a moment it felt real, raw, and human. You didn't ask for their secrets, you didn't pry. You just listened with presence, with silence, with something deeper than most people know how to hold. And then they vanished. They stopped texting, stopped calling, became distant, cold, as if that moment of connection never happened. Carl Jung believed that some people carry the archetype of the healer, not because of what they do, but because of who they've become. You carry that energy, a field of emotional gravity that makes people feel safe. Safe enough to be real, safe enough to be vulnerable, safe enough to touch a part of themselves they usually avoid. But that safety comes with a price. Because once someone sees their own pain in the mirror you provide, they're faced with a choice, grow or retreat. And most people retreat not because you did anything wrong, but because they weren't ready. Your presence didn't break them. It revealed them. And revelation without readiness feels like exposure. You became the doorway to a version of themselves they weren't ready to meet, and so they walked away, not from you but from themselves. You didn't lose the connection. You just made it too real. Sign 11, you're the mirror they avoid. You don't confront people, you don't criticize, you're not trying to teach, fix, or correct anyone. You're just there, present, grounded, still. But somehow people shift around you. They fidget, they talk too much, or they say too little. Deep down, they avoid your eyes because looking at you, really looking, feels like looking into themselves. Carl Jung believed that the more you integrate your shadow, the more you become a mirror to those who haven't. Not by intention, but by contrast. Your presence doesn't reflect their image. It reflects their truth. The anger they suppress, the fear they deny, the dreams they've abandoned, the masks they wear. You don't speak it, but they feel it. And what they feel, they fear. Because when someone is not ready to confront themselves, even kindness feels intrusive. Even silence feels invasive. Even your calm feels confrontational. You are the mirror they never asked for, but can't forget. And so, they avoid you not because you're dangerous, but because you're revealing. You don't show them who you are. You show them who they're not. That kind of reflection is rare, uncomfortable, and unforgettable. You're not misunderstood because you're unclear. You're misunderstood because you're too clear. And for people hiding from themselves, clarity feels like exposure. And exposure feels like pain. Sign 12. You radiate unapologetic energy. You're not loud, you're not aggressive, and you're not trying to dominate the space. But still, you feel like a lot to some people. Why? Because you don't shrink. You don't soften your truth to make others comfortable. You don't dilute your energy to fit in. You carry yourself with quiet conviction, the kind that doesn't need to prove anything because it's already rooted in something deeper, self-respect. Carl Jung believed that when someone begins to embody their whole self, light, shadow, contradictions, and all, they stop negotiating their existence. You've stopped apologizing for who you are. You've stopped editing your voice to avoid tension. You've stopped making yourself small so others can feel big. And that makes you dangerous to those who've never known themselves without external approval. People say you're intense, too opinionated, too sensitive, too deep. But what they really mean is that you're not easy to control. Your energy doesn't ask for permission. It just is fully, authentically, unapologetically. And in a world built on pleasing, performing, and pretending, that kind of presence feels like a disruption. You didn't come to play a role. You came to live in truth, and your aura reflects that. So yes, you may be too much for those who've never met someone who won't bend to be liked. But for the ones who are awake, they don't feel overwhelmed by your presence. They feel invited by it, to rise, to remember, to reclaim their own. Sign 13. You walk alone, but not lost. There's a distance around you, a quiet space no one seems to enter, at least not for long. You've felt it for years, at school, at work, even among friends and family. Not the loneliness of being unwanted, but the solitude of being unmatched. Carl Jung believed that those who walk the path of individuation, the journey toward their true, whole self, often do so alone. Not because they're broken, but because they've outgrown the noise, the masks, and the shallow connections that once felt like belonging. You see too much now. You feel too deeply. You ask questions that make others uncomfortable. And you carry an energy that can't be contained by surface-level living. So you walk alone but not in sadness, in sovereignty. Because solitude for you isn't a punishment. It's a sign. A sign that you no longer chase closeness just to escape yourself. A sign that your inner world has become enough. A sign that your path isn't crowded because it was never meant to be. People will misread you, call you distant, call you guarded. But the truth is, you're just rare. And rare souls don't travel in packs. They walk the edges, the in-between, the quiet roads where depth is the only companion. You're not lost. You're not behind. You're not too late. You're ahead of the timeline, already living the kind of truth most people never touch. And that kind of walk, it's meant to be quiet. So maybe now it makes sense. The silence when you entered the room, the subtle glances, the tension, the distance that always seemed to follow you. It was never really about your words, your tone, or your choices. It was your presence, your stillness, your clarity, your refusal to perform. You didn't mean to threaten anyone. You weren't trying to provoke anyone. You were just awake in a world still half asleep. Jung said that awakening begins the moment you confront yourself. Not the version you show the world, but the raw, unfiltered truth beneath the mask. And you did that. You walked through your shadow, you faced your chaos, and you reclaimed your soul. And when you returned, you glowed differently. Not louder, not brighter, but realer. And real is rare. Real is confronting. Real makes people squirm because it reflects everything they are not ready to see. You were never too much. You were never the villain. You were simply a mirror to those still hiding from their own reflection. You didn't carry darkness. You carried light. But light, when it enters a dark room, doesn't always get applause. Sometimes it gets attacked, misunderstood, or pushed away because it exposes what was meant to stay hidden. But don't dim. Don't shrink. Don't apologize for the truth you carry. Because the very thing that makes you feel alone is the proof you are becoming whole. Not everyone will understand you. Not everyone is supposed to. Your path isn't built for approval. It's built for awakening. So the next time they call you intense, intimidating, or too much, smile and remember. You weren't here to make them comfortable. You were here to remind them what truth feels like.